in order to have any intention with your free space, first of all, you need to make the free space and then make peace with it. And I think that's what I was working through. It was like, I need to learn how to feel worthy without the guitar. That's what that was. That whole season of life was the Lord doing business with me and showing me that I'm loved and I don't have to play another song for the rest of my life to be loved by him.
Between the Grooves is hosted by James Curtis, music director and morning man in the Greater Toronto Area on Joy Radio, and Drew Brown, Juno-nominated singer-songwriter and worship leader. Both hope to share insights into Christian music, exploring ministry, message, and everything in between. You can connect with the show at faithstrongtoday.com/betweenthegrooves or via Twitter @betweengrooves. Now, here's James and Drew.
We are back. It's great to be back. It's great to be here.
Jeez. How you doing, man?
Not too bad. It's like when you have a repeat guest, right? It's like, oh, it's good to be here. Yeah, it's good to be here too. It's good to be back. Yeah, good to be back. Yeah. I normally say it's good to be back when I enter the coffee shop. It's good to be back.
Doubt.
Yes.
Good to be back.
So it's all about priorities. How are you doing, Drew?
I'm doing good. I feel good. I'm ready to rock, ready to party with you, man.
You sound good.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate that. You doing okay? You feeling good?
Yeah, I'm doing good. I'm really looking forward to sharing this conversation that we've had with Andrew Ripp. This guy, a completely unexpected conversation, which, as you know, I love, right?
Yeah.
You know about this guy. You know that he's been in the music business for a while. He's recorded stuff. He writes great music. He co-writes. We're not talking about any of that stuff, which is awesome, you know?
That's right.
Having said that, like if you've never heard his song Jericho, which is a big radio hit,
it's so good.
What a great song. And he's got a new song that's just come out as well. That's just starting to hit the airwaves. This guy is a phenomenal songwriter, a phenomenal artist, and we're not going to talk about any of that stuff. That's the hilarious part of the whole thing.
That's the best part.
Yeah, that's the best part. And so we're going to talk a little bit, just not getting too much into detail here, but talk a little bit about busyness versus business in music and any other business for that matter, because it's not just in the music industry. So we're going to get to that in just a bit. But before we do, I guess, Drew, you've heard by now about the Junos. They've been postponed once again. They were originally scheduled for March, then they got pushed to May, and now they're rescheduled for June 6th. Of course, the Juno Awards is like the Grammys in Canada, right? It's recognizing Canadian artists in particular. So that's being pushed back. And I guess that's to be expected with everything that's gone around, the world for the last little while. And last week we actually talked a little bit about concerts. The fact that
online shows and stuff.
Yeah. And the fact that, the music festivals that are going on, I mean, everybody lives for them, right? Anybody who loves music loves going to a music festival, especially when you get to hear multiple artists in the summertime on one stage. And of course, as far as a livelihood is concerned, that's important for artists and musicians. How is that impacting you at this point?
But it's hard, there's been a bunch of festivals that have, shut down. Blues Fest in Ottawa, they are closing their doors for this year, but they are already working on next year. I think they already booked like Rage Against the Machine for next year. Okay. So they're already thinking about 2022, which is smart. And, that's the way to do it. Yeah. And so, there's a lot of things that I was crossing my fingers for that now I'm getting the email saying we are postponing this year. Or a few who are pushing back into the fall, which is fine. But this is tough. It's a tough season for not just musicians, but tech people and people like managers and everybody's struggling, and that's okay. Just sucks.
I don't.
It is what it is.
Yeah, I don't mind as much when they postpone something, even if it's to the following year, as long as it's still happening, because it's light at the end of the tunnel. It's something to look forward to. It's something on the horizon that you can look forward to. It's frustrating for the delay, obviously, what really bothers me and distresses me is when something's like canceled, we're not doing it again. I mean, I heard recently in my town that I live in, there's this big, huge flea market that happens on the weekends. And I heard this, and I'm not even sure if it's official yet or if it's just a rumor, but the talk was that it's done. Like, it's over. It's not happening anymore. They're shutting their doors.
Oh, wow.
Because the way they work, I guess the vendors themselves are on just a month-to-month lease, so there's nothing necessarily on paper, right? And so it's difficult for them to get funding from the government and government assistance and whatnot.
Right.
And for the property owner himself, being able to prove to the government that these are my tenants when they are month to month. And again, it's not on paper. So he has difficulty getting some government support as well. And so it's at the point where, you know what, I can't make any money doing this. We're shutting down. Right.
Yeah.
And so that's a lot of people that are out of work because of that.
Oh, wow.
And that's the part that, bothers me when you hear about something, and you've heard it in the news anyways about companies that, we're shutting down. That's it. We're done. Restaurants, whatever, right?
Yeah.
Even music venues. We heard, I don't know, who was it recently? Somebody told us on the show about, a big place in Nashville that's shut down. They're not doing stuff anymore, right?
The exit in, that's
yeah.
right.
So that's the part that really disturbs me and bothers me because could we have done anything different? I don't know.
I don't know.
So
yeah, it sucks, man. It's weird driving downtown whenever I rarely go, but when I do, and seeing my favorite venues up for sale.
Right.
These massive for sale signs, or a few of them already been bulldozed already.
Right.
So it is a struggle for everybody,
or just vacant, like a big sign that says vacant. It's like like that's so sad.
Yeah. So it's tough. It's a tough season. We'll get through it for sure.
Yeah.
But I know me and my siblings, all in the music industry and in any art sector, we're all like, when is this going to end? When can we find some?
And I suppose
money.
Yeah, I suppose I suppose to be hopeful and to look at the positive element to all of this is that the people that put those things together, whether it was a venue or a production company putting together concerts and stuff, the people that run that stuff are very knowledgeable, they're skilled, they're brilliant, and so at the end of the day, in 2 months, 5 months, 6 months, a year down the road, that their names are going to crop back up again and they're going to be part of something bigger and better, hopefully. So
I couldn't have said it better.
I'm trying to remain optimistic here.
That's good. That's good. Someone has to.
Yeah. Well, I'll speak for both of us then.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay. So Drew is no longer with us. He's just, sorry. I'm speaking for both of us, right?
Yeah, exactly. That's right.
Hopefully people got that. I've got this warped sense of humor.
Probably not.
Yeah, probably not. Oh, well. Anyway, let's get into our conversation with Andrew Ripp. This is a guy that I, quite honestly, am not as familiar with as you are, Drew. My introduction to Andrew was literally his song Jericho, which hit the Christian radio airwaves. And what a great, great song. And then just learning more about him and the fact that he's been around for a while. He's been co-writing like a lot of hit songs that you would recognize anyways. To have him as a guest on our show, what an honor. And then on top of that, to have a conversation that is totally unexpected, where we're not even talking about his music. Like, talk about a humble guy,
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, like he's not, sometimes we get contacted by artists or management companies or marketing companies that want us to promote their artist, right? And so, their intention is to promote their music, promote, upcoming concerts or whatever else. This guy is totally not about that, right? And it's very obvious in this conversation. So let's get into it right now. Andrew Ripp on Between the Grooves.
How are you?
We're doing good. How are you doing?
Beautiful, man. Hey, I'm so sorry. I'm a few minutes late. I've been trying to get my duet to play or to utilize the SM7 that I have that we do demos on.
Right.
Yep.
And I have been having issues getting it going this morning based on some I don't know what it is. My duet is like 400 years old, so that could probably be part of it. But I figured I'd just call because I don't want to leave you guys hanging here. Is it okay if we do it like this, where I've got my AirPods in?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it works, man. It works.
Dude, awesome.
Hey, Andrew, I got to ask you a question. I have received in the last week, I've had 2 people follow me on Instagram, and the claim is that they are the personal account of Andrew Ripp. 2 different accounts.
Yeah, I'm getting tons of those right now. I don't know why or what the situation is, but we've been working on it, trying to contact who we need to at Instagram, specifically on Instagram.
Yeah.
So there's like somebody doing something, and we're not 100% sure what the deal is or what they're after, but it's been quite annoying. But we are all over it, and hopefully we can get it, to a point where I don't have to worry about it anymore. But it's definitely been something that has been, front of the to-do list over the last couple of days.
It really annoys me when somebody else gives me a to-do list like that. It's like,
my God,
you got your own, you got your whole week. Yeah, exactly. You got your whole week lined up. This is the stuff I need to get accomplished and to do and stuff. And then you got this stuff. It's like, okay, I'm not able to do everything now because I got to deal with this stuff now. Like, great.
Yeah.
Really frustrating.
Yeah. It's wild, but you know what, man? It's all good in the hood. I'm grateful to have people that want to be me, I guess.
That's right, eh? That's a good place to be.
If they really knew. If they only knew.
If they only knew.
That's right.
That's right.
What flattery. What flattery.
Oh, my gosh.
Exactly.
Well, dude, man, it's so good to have you here on the show. So good that we can chat with you. And I personally remember hearing about you through Dave Barnes. He was... like back in the day, he used to be a big Twitter head. He was always tweeting and doing videos all the time. And he posted a bunch of stuff about you. And I was like, oh man, who's this guy? And then I was in Nashville, I think it was like early 2011. I picked up your album and I was like, because I was a huge Dave Barnes fan. So if he's saying you're good, then he must be good. I picked it up and I loved it. And then all of a sudden, a few months later, you came up with that Christmas EP. I can't remember what it was called, but it was so good. And you had that Joy to the World cover. That was so killer. I still do that cover, that version.
Man, that is awesome. That's like, I love that it came through Barnes, first of all, because Barnes has been such an advocate for me and my music, and has been such a gift from God in my life. Like I met him kind of randomly through a friend who showed him my first record that I ever made. It was in 2008 or 9. And Barnes heard it through my buddy Lucas. And he was like, hey, I'd love to have Ripp come open some shows. And he just kind of cold called me. I didn't know who Dave was. It's like, yeah, I'd love to have you come open some shows on the West Coast. I was living in California at the time. And, it was like within 3 minutes of meeting him at soundcheck. He was on stage soundchecking. I walked into Hotel Cafe in Los Angeles, and he stopped the band mid-song. I'll never forget that because, most people wouldn't do that. But Dave saw me walk in. I'd never met him in my life, stopped the band and jumped off the front of the stage, gave me a big hug. And I was like, man, that's awesome. And from that point on, I remember in that first conversation, he goes, hey, dude, I think you're supposed to move to Nashville. I want to make a record with you. I want to help you make a record, write some songs, make a record, produce it. And I want to introduce you to my fans. And I was like, oh my gosh. Well, cut to like 3 months later, that's exactly what happened.
Wow.
So he totally changed my life out of nowhere. There's a lot more in that story of how the Lord really worked it and orchestrated the whole thing. I didn't know the Lord maybe a year prior. And my first prayer when I became a believer was that God would give me friends that knew him, because I was surrounded by kind of a party crowd.
Sure.
And Barnes was one of the first people that the Lord brought into my life.
That's incredible.
Man,
now, what was
so
going
good.
what was going through your mind then? Because you were opening up for him in California. So after he's told you all this stuff, and I think you need to move to Nashville, and I want to produce something with you. What was it like opening for him after all of that was said?
Well, Well, there's I don't know if you guys have had this experience. I think a lot of musicians have, where if you got any inclination of any talent, if you got a voice and you're like, start going after it, people will hear you and think you're good and want to be a part of it, but won't actually have the time. So they'll say things that they mean in the moment, but then don't have the follow through. Yep. And there was a lot of that in my life, kind of in my, early 20s. I lived in LA. I was gunslinging, trying to do just become a musician somehow, some way. And there's just a lot of that where people will say a lot of false promises. And I just remember thinking that immediately. I was like, oh, here we go again.
Right.
Barnes, he's like, we're going to do this, this, and this. And I'm like, okay, I'll never hear from you again after these shows.
Yeah.
Well, that's what was different about it. It was like, he wasn't blowing smoke. He really believed, and he had the capacity to back up his words. And, he's still one of my best friends. He lives, 15 minutes away from me. We'll write songs together, but we kind of use writing songs together as an excuse to just hang out and laugh.
Of course.
It's so good. So, I mean, that was the first thing that came to me when you asked me that question. It's just like, wow, he actually is backing this up. It's insane.
That happens so many times to musicians. Like I've had that in my life, and I've heard that story often where sometimes the biggest issue is the fact that people want to support, they want to get behind it, they want to be part of whatever you're doing. But they don't have the means, the capacity, which is totally understandable. It just kind of sucks. It's totally fine.
It totally stinks.
Yeah.
I mean, look, you can't. I've probably done it, if I'm being honest. Like,
fair enough.
I've probably been the guy to be like, yeah, we should do this. And it's like, oh, I don't even remember it the next day. But, you know what I'm saying? That's the problem. I think right now in my life, I don't know, like the situation y'all are in, but after coming out of the pandemic, like I know it's still going on, but it feels like there's a light at the end of the tunnel. So I say like we're coming out of it. But there was just a lot of, like, in my own personal business life, a lot happened last year where I got really busy. And when I get busy, my capacity goes down for the things that I really value and want to make sure that I have time for and to do. And that's one of those things that I'd love to do is, when somebody reaches out and they've got talent, I'd love to actually like take them out for coffee and pour into them. But when we get busy, it's like impossible, right?
That's the thing.
Yeah, I tend to be, and I've said this to you before, Drew, I tend to be a very much a to-do list type guy. So every day I've got this list of things to do, and I'm not going to necessarily accomplish everything on that list, but there's certainly 2 or 3 points of things I want to accomplish. And I feel despair and frustration when I don't achieve those things, because then it's going to be something I push off to the next day, and I keep pushing it off, and then I feel guilty that I haven't accomplished what I set out to accomplish. Right. And sometimes I think when you want to be that person to mentor someone else or to spend that time grabbing a coffee, sometimes you have to be a little bit more intentional. Now, it may be difficult with a pandemic to necessarily, physically go out for a coffee, but there's Zoom, there's other technology to get together with people, but I do miss that.
Gosh, it's even all the way down to the prayer life. Like, I find I'm in the best place in my own personal life when I'm praying for other people. But when I'm not, I don't have capacity. I'm praying. It's always like, Lord, help me do this and help me. But when I'm in that space of like, I've got room in my life for the things that matter, for that quiet time in the morning or whatever it is for you, to set your intention and your mind and your spirit. That's when I'm at my best. It's like, honestly, even when I'm like, that's when I'm writing the best songs, is when I'm tuned in and I've got space to take a walk with my dog. So I don't know. I'm reading this book right now by a guy named John Mark Comer. I'm sure you've probably heard of this because it's a famous book, but The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. You guys know about this book?
Yeah, totally.
Man, it's just so good. It's such a great reminder. It's one of those books where you're like, yeah, I've heard that, I know that, but you're not doing any of them.
Right.
Yes, the story of my life.
I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, Lord, I got to step into this thing, man. I got to step back into this space where I've got capacity for the things that matter most. But that's just me being real. I'm getting there. Slowly but surely getting back to that space.
That reminds me, a few years ago, we had a course in our church, and it was one of these Dave Ramsey university courses. Not really a university course, but whatever they call it, financial university, I think is what he calls it.
Financial peace.
Yep.
Yeah, financial peace. Yeah. So I took that course, and I didn't really feel I needed to take it. I thought, I'm doing pretty good. And I took the course, and from week to week, there were certain things said and certain things you learned, and a lot of it I looked at, say, yeah, I'm doing that, so I'm doing that right. And there was just one or two key things that I wasn't doing. I remember one of them was, buying a car. He was talking about the fact that when you buy a car, you should pay cash for a car. Don't finance it, because if you finance it, you're paying, a few $100s a month for this vehicle that you could be putting towards something else, or you could be spending on something else. And I was always under the impression, like for me personally and my family, the deal was, okay, we buy a car, we finance it for say 3 years, and then 3 years later replace that vehicle and finance again. So really it's just the same expense every month. Right. But then I got into this whole thinking of, let's save up money to buy a car. Let's buy a used car, not necessarily new because it's cheaper. And we've been doing that ever since. It's like, this isn't rocket science. It was so simple. Right. And yet it wasn't something I ever, did. It was, I just felt maybe I couldn't do it, or maybe I was just not applying, So it's the same sort of stuff where you read something or you hear something and it's like, yeah, that's a great idea. But if you don't apply it, it's never going to apply to you. That's right. You're never going to get that benefit, right?
Right.
So
that's right. And if you don't have the time to apply it, you're just like, you're spinning. I work out with the same fella pretty much every morning. His name's Brandon. He's an awesome dude. And at the beginning of our sessions, maybe 3 months ago is when we really started. And I knew that there was something bigger going on, that it wasn't just about a physical training situation where we're diving into working out together. There was something bigger in the spirit. And I'm realizing now that this is exactly what it is. Brandon comes in every day kind of almost proud and bragging about how much is going on. And I just know that the Lord is trying to use me to be like, oh man, you sound busy, but there's such a difference between having a full life and a busy life.
Oh, yes.
Right. It's like,
yes,
busy is like, man, we need to start trimming some things out. Full is a capacity to give and to pray for others and to think of others and to have coffee with the guy that needs you, or call the friend, or call your mom even. Like, when's the last time you called your mom? That's a really great indication of whether or not you're over capacity. But anyway, that's been the theme over my life as of late. Eliminate that hurry, eliminate that wild, crazy, busy schedule. Oh, let me tell you this. This is one last thing around this subject. My wife told me something a few years back around the same kind of theme. I stepped away from my management and my record label in 2015 or 16. And I remember immediately my schedule just emptied, and it made me realize how much of my identity was rooted in having a full schedule and having things to do and like knocking things out. And I remember her at the breakfast table one morning. I was looking at my phone. Just, she could tell there was anxiety because there was nothing on my schedule. And she just looked up at me and she goes, just because there's nothing on your schedule doesn't mean it's not full.
Right.
I was like,
right.
Whoa, that is such a good word. Like, with nothing on your schedule, it means you can be intentional about putting the things on your schedule that the Lord has for you, or even just sitting in silence. So that's what I did. It was a couple year period after I left my team in 2016. There was a 2-year period of time where I put my guitar away completely.
Really?
Without the idea of, like, I didn't know I was going to be picking it up again. It was like, I was so worn out from I call it kind of 2 phases of my career. The first one ended, and then I was like, legitimately, I don't know if I'll ever do this again. To just sitting in silence, being with the Lord, listening to music for the joy of listening to the music rather than milking a song for inspiration. That's what us writers do sometimes. We can find ourselves listening to music to get ideas.
Yes.
Rather than listening to music because it's something we are in love with and it's powerful and it moves you. But yeah, I remember kind of falling in love with worship music during that time, which is why the songs that are coming out of me today are happening, because I've realized in that season of doing really nothing and just sitting with the Lord, I realized that music is a weapon. It's like this powerful weapon. If you pair melodies with truth, like, it changes people's lives. And it changed my life in that time. I'd listen to like the Hillsong stuff. Like, there's a song called Seasons on their Christmas record that just destroyed me. It was so good. It just lifted me up. I was in a really tough place. I was just like, listen to this song, and suddenly I feel the weight literally lift off of my shoulders. It was so beautiful.
I have so many questions, but let me start with this one.
Yeah.
I want to dig back into that season where you kind of put the guitar away for a couple of years. Can we dig deeper into that? Like,
yeah, sure.
I know you already talked about the reasons and stuff like that, but let's dig deeper into the reasons why you did it and what you learned in those 2 years. Like, even what was like being in those 2 years without music. I'm curious about like what, because I've done that before too. In these, in the hardest moments of my life, where I just like, I'm walking away from music, so I need a break. I need to sort of find, rediscover myself almost, rediscover my purpose and rediscover. So yeah, tell me that story. What's all about?
Yeah, I mean, there was a season right before leaving my team that I had been on the road a good bit, like over 150 dates a year. So away from my friends and wife, more so than not. And at the end of that period of time, I was having panic attacks, which I don't really ever remember even. I remember people talking about it, but I was like, how do you get there? Like, how, but then it was me, I was in it, and I'm like having trouble breathing. And I'm like, oh my goodness, not having suicidal thoughts necessarily, but understanding why people would consider ending it because of the despair I was experiencing and the just trauma in my brain. Like, my body was shutting down because I was trying to keep up with this runaway train that was like, impossible to keep up with. So I stepped away. I'll tell you this part of the story. This is important. In the midst of these panic attacks, I came home from a tour, and I told a good friend of mine that I was experiencing these things, this fear, this intense fear. And he's like, hey, you should talk to this guy that's been speaking at our church. He's been doing some stuff around the fear just subject, and he's he's awesome, knows what he's talking about. So I sat down with this gentleman for 20 minutes at his house, and it was like weird. Like, I walked into his house and he was like sitting in a lazy boy. I was like, he didn't even get up, and I just walked over to him and I shook his hand and sat down on the couch. He goes, so what's up? It wasn't like, good to meet you. It wasn't like, let's go get coffee. It was like, come over to my house. I'm going to sit in my lazy boy and you're going to tell me your story. So like immediately it was weird. And you know how the Lord just kind of uses weird folks?
Oh yeah.
I got to deal with Drew all the time. So
that's what I'm saying. It's always strange, man. But anyway, I walked into his house, sat down, told him, spilled my heart out on the table. Just all of it. It was just, I gave him everything. What you don't tell strangers,
Right.
And
right.
I told him everything. And I remember at the end, I said, I'm just ready to be free, with tears in my eyes. And he looks up at me and just says, nope. And I was like offended at first. I was like, wow. I just spilled my guts. And I said, I'm ready to be free. And you look up at me and all you have to say is nope. And after a little bit of silence, he goes, you already are. And for some reason, it just hit me. I was like, yeah, I've heard that before. I know that I'm already free in Christ, but I never had received the gift.
Right.
I'd never learned how to step into freedom until that moment. It was like, I understood it. My spirit just came alive. I was like, oh, this is a battle that I don't have to fight because it's actually already done. And now it's a gift to be received. It's not you don't fight for a gift. You receive it.
That's right.
So my panic attacks were happening because I was fighting for a gift that I couldn't win. So I was running myself ragged, and my brain was just scrambled eggs, and my body was reacting to that by panicking until this moment where I stepped into the gift that God gave me, which was freedom. And I can't even tell you, like, that little moment, he probably said 10 words the whole time I was there, and it changed my life. So that was the beginning of me realizing I needed to step away from my team. So when I did that, I remember it was at least a year and a half, I think closer to 2 years, of just wake up in the morning, light a candle, get down on my knees, do the quiet time thing, hit the bike on my skateboard, come back, research. I did a lot of studying the word and what God says about. I researched a lot about David and how he killed a lion and a bear in the woods by himself when nobody was watching, before the Lord could give him the honor and could trust him to slay Goliath in front of the nations. Like, that was so cool. I just knew that I was in the David season of killing the lion and the bear. I didn't know what my Goliath would be later on, and still honestly don't, but I do know that season of life, and in the moment, I just knew there was something special going on that I was stepping into. It was like the Lord was doing something awesome. And I'll also say this: I had the luxury because of we had an Airbnb. Nashville was like huge for tourists at the time. But we had this little Airbnb house, so I didn't have to like scramble and get a job. And I was so grateful for that, because to step away from your main gig and not have to run right into a job, I knew was a real gift. And I think that also just put pressure on me to like really step into it, because I knew it was just this divine season that the Lord gave me. It was like, how is it that I don't need to get a job right now and I can like sit here in my thoughts with the Lord? It was crazy. Yeah. But anyway, as I did, my heart began to recognize that a lot of my identity had been wrapped up in being Andrew Ripp, the musician, and I needed it. And I think ego was being killed in that time. Intention, we talked about intention earlier with, eliminating hurry, but like, that was part of it for me, where I was just like, wow, in order to have any intention with your free space, first of all, you need to make the free space and then make peace with it. Because a lot of times people are afraid of free space because then they have to sit with themselves. And I think that's what I was working through. It was like, I need to learn how to like me without the guitar, how to feel worthy without the guitar. Mm-hmm. Wow. And that's what that was. That whole season of life was me, the Lord doing business with me and showing me that I'm loved, and I don't have to play another song for the rest of my life to be loved by him.
It's interesting, Andrew, you're talking about that, and I heard a message recently that just kind of is so similar. And it's kind of around the whole setting of goals. And, we talked about the busyness. We talked about, the to-do list and being busy with that. And the message I heard was not to spend time in the to-do list, but spending time in the to-be list, meaning awesome. What do you want to be? Right? You want to be a good husband. You want to be a good father. You want to be a good leader. And I'm thinking, that plays right into what you're saying. And it's so true. Yes. And that dynamically changes what your to-do list is, right? Mm-hmm. It completely changes it. And you get rid of the stuff that's just meaningless or not, achieving anything. You get rid of that whole busyness in your life,
That's right. And to go along with that, I think the main theme for me, right at the beginning of that season, was exactly that. Like, I remember feeling like the Lord wanted me to kill my dreams, like to make room for his. Not that I would never have dreams again, but like, man, if you could just get rid of these things that you thought you were supposed to be, like your whole upbringing, your parents are putting stuff on you. Your friends are putting stuff on you. The praise that you receive at the game when you score the goal. Now suddenly you got to kick goals to be worthy. And, all these things that you carry into your 20s and then into your 30s. It's like, at some point, I think we're called to lay them all down and go, all right, Lord, I'm killing these dreams of what I thought I was supposed to be, because the perspective that I had was pretty thin. I mean, I was just a kid growing up. I need to put all of those dreams down to make room for a new one, which is yours over my life.
Wow.
And I think that's why I'm talking to you guys right now, honestly, because this Jericho song that worked last year or beginning of this year did not happen because I was writing a ton of songs. Jericho was like in a batch of 5 songs that I had written. I used to write 90 songs and pick 12, put them on a record. Now I'm writing every song that I write for me, you're hearing, because they're coming out of my records. But there's just a lack of striving now. And it seems like when you can get out of your own way, the Lord can really breathe on things, because, you're holding dreams now in an open hand. You're holding, your to-do list in an open hand. It's not like, I got to get these things done. It's like, all right, Lord, there's too much for me to do today here. So I'm just going to open up my hand, and you just breathe on the things that I'm supposed to be doing. But I think a lot of times we can get lost in just trying to get it done, because that's where we're finding our worth, right?
That's right.
Get out of your own way. I love that. Get out of your own way. Like, that is so powerful, that statement right there,
Well, that's something that I've been trying to put into practice with songwriting, and it's worked its way into my life, like on a day-to-day. But like, songwriting is so strange. I find that the harder I try to write songs, the worse they get. But when I make space for them to reveal themselves, when I get out of my own way, sometimes I'll sit down at the piano. A lot of my new songs happen when I'm not thinking about writing one. I'll sit down at the piano and I'll just sing, almost like gibberish until something starts to make sense, or a melody. You can feel there's something on a melody or a chord structure or a word. That's how Jericho came out. I screamed out the word Jericho one morning, and it was like, whoa, I didn't know much about the story, to be honest with you. But when the word came out, I knew God was doing something. So I went back in and researched Joshua marching around the walls. And I was like, oh my gosh, something's going on here. But anyway, that's my way of that's my kind of like formula of getting out of the way for me right now in my own business and work. Everybody would have to find their own way to do that. But for me, it's like, I'll sit down and just not think at all and just start doing what I do, using the gift that he gave me, and then just kind of follow the lead.
That's actually my approach to writing a lot of the times. Like, I'll have some like intentional writing moments, whatever.
Totally.
But a lot of it's kind of like, okay, let's just see what happens and see what comes out. We'll see what sort of springs out, or there's something in this melody. There's something in this gibberish I just need to capture in this moment. I think it's really cool that, like, again, I was a huge fan where you're doing like sort of the rock pop stuff, and I'm a huge fan of what you're doing now. And it's really kind of cool to hear your story between those two moments of like, I think it's so awesome. What have you discovered and what have you learned about yourself as you sort of switched gears, as you moved more into the worship world, if you will? Because it's a whole different language. At the same time, it's similar. You're communicating thoughts and ideas, et cetera, but you're communicating for a different reason and purpose, it seems. So, like, have you learned anything from that?
I mean, I've learned so much, but right now, the first thing that comes to mind is that all those lessons that I did kind of learn, those epiphanies, those God moments, those massive encounters in the midst of that 2-year season of quiet. I thought that, like, I had, like, now I've got this war chest full of these, like, weapons that I'm carrying. I just drag it behind me everywhere I go. Now I've got all these weapons that I've gathered. But you still got to take them out and swing them sometimes. So it's not like you just get it once and then it's done. Like, I mean, I shared with you at the beginning of this, I'm busy again, and I don't like that. So I'm having to combat busy with intentional. So I think the first thing that I thought of when you said that was just, it's not a one and done. The importance of the daily, for me, the daily quiet time is so huge. But in the worship world, as far as like my language and what I use as like how I communicate my story in songs, nothing's really changed there. I think the only thing that might have changed is a realization of how powerful music is. Like, when you recognize that your job actually has the power to change lives rather than just entertain somebody for 3.5 minutes. like it's an honor to be able to do it rather than like, oh yeah, I get to do this. No. Like, I'm going to steward this gift now. And every single song that I put on my record, I want to make sure is for a reason. Like it has the breath of God on it. It's not just a song that's going to, give somebody a warm fuzzy, although that's a nice feeling, but I'd rather an engraving on the heart of someone than just a fluffy feeling for 3.5 minutes, like I want people to know that, like their worth is not wrapped up in what they do. How do you do that? How do you convey that message in a song? I don't know, but that's my job. So I think there's just a reverence for it now that wasn't there before.
Wow. Can I say, Andrew, this is not a conversation I was expecting. This has been better.
Oh, so good. I'm glad. I'm enjoying it.
Yeah.
I want to hear more from you guys around these subjects too. I just, I feel like I'm just Ralphing on you, but
no,
I'm just going with
it's
it.
Good.
This is all powerful stuff. It's reiterating stuff that we should know. We should be doing this stuff, and yet you get so worked up in, like you say, the busyness of life and things, and just kind of going through the motions because you feel you have to go through the motions when really it's take a step back and why are you doing what you're doing?
Right. Yeah, that's really it. It's not an easy thing to step back when you're kind of spinning with I lived in LA for a while, and I remember the analogy that we would use when we left LA. I used to think that leaving LA was giving up. I remember thinking like, oh, we can't leave. We got to keep fighting. And then finally, like after the Barnes thing, we left, and then I could see this lifestyle I was in is almost like a tornado. It was like this thing that you thought you had to keep up with. Like you're in it and everybody in there is spinning. Not to bag LA because this isn't everyone, but it was my experience out there. It was like everybody was spinning and trying and striving and I got to get to the next level. And but you can't see that you're spinning because everybody's spinning with you. So it looks normal.
Right.
But then you get spat out and you're like, oh my gosh, like you look at that storm we were in. It was like, that was insane.
Well, look at the people that are still in it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it's like, oh my gosh. And I have friends that are spinning right now.
Yeah.
And that's part of the difficulty in conveying the gospel, because I think some people try to, it's like force this truth that we know. It's hard to love somebody that's not ready to hear. Like I'm not going to call my buddy and be like, you're spinning. It's be like, I would call my buddy and just ask him how he's doing,
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
But it's tough. I'm not super great at that, if I'm being honest. A lot of times I'm like, you're a spinning guy. Come on, dude. Come over here. Move to Nashville. Let's slow down.
There you go.
Yeah.
So good. Dude, I've been a huge fan of yours for so long. And so it's so good to actually just hang out and have this conversation and get to know you a bit more. So the man behind the music. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today. It's been a joy. It really has been.
Wow. Well, likewise, guys. Thanks for making time for me. I appreciate it.
I did not expect that. When you speak with a musician and an artist, you kind of expect to have the conversation of, specifically about their music and what makes them tick and what are their songwriting techniques. And I mean, he's done tons of co-writes, but we didn't talk about any of that stuff, right? It's just an incredible conversation. And his what he said about get out of your own way. It's so powerful, and so true,
This is it. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that we want to talk about. Life between the grooves, the stuff that's not about necessarily lyrics and recording, but it's about, what happens in those moments around and behind and in front of the music, which I love. I love this conversation. I've been following this guy for so long. It's so good to finally have a sit down with him. His story and the way he tells his story was so amazing. I'm so glad we had a chance to sit down with Andrew Ripp.
I think it's so relevant too for artists, in particular, knowing that we have a lot of artists and musicians and people in the music industry listening to this show, and they are stuck in that rat race much like people in the business world anyways, outside of music would be, but, spinning in that tornado as he described it. And it's so true. And, while, over the last 14 months or so, we've been in this pandemic, and it hasn't been as busy for people, there are people still spinning in that tornado, and it's not going to get better. It's going to get worse as things get back to a norm once again, right?
Yeah.
And so to listen to what he had to say and almost step away, take that step away, take that break and analyze, like, what is this achieving? Like, why am I doing this? Right? Because essentially that's what he does. Like, why the heck am I doing all this? I'm just going to cut everything right now and take a step back and spend time with God, spend time in the relationship, spend time with people, my wife or whatever else, and analyze what needs to actually be, what I need to be doing. As I said before about being versus doing.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's a helpful process to do. I've done it before too. It is so good to kind of just take a break and sort of rediscover yourself, and also rediscover kind of not just who you are, but also who you are in God, and what he's up to, and what he's speaking, and what he wants to do through you. Yeah. That's what it's all about. Thank you, Mr. Ripp. This was amazing.
Well, it is time for artist advice, and this week we hear back from previous guest Hope Darst.
I mean, obviously I fall into the category of a new artist, but I'm not a young whippersnapper. So I've lived a little bit of life. And I think if there's anything I can encourage artists in general, it would be to stay connected to your local church community, specifically to find a place to serve in your local church. I think it's really important that we always continue to stay really tethered to people, because that's where we work out all the things in life. It's hard when you're an artist and you're out on the road and you're touring and you come home. It's easy to just want to hole up in your house and just do laundry and be with your family and do nothing else. But I think if you can force yourself to get into your community and serve, it will make you a better person. And I think it ultimately will make you a better artist.
Simple words. Mm-hmm. Stay connected to your local church and serve in your local church. It's so important. It really is. It keeps you grounded, I guess.
That's the perfect word, for sure.
I guess that's ultimately what it does for you. It's great to be so involved in your career and so involved in doing concerts and gigs and being on the road and everything else as an artist. But to be grounded is even more important. And the fact that you are grounded, I think, says a lot, because people can read that in you anyways, That's right. When I used to travel and tour, and even when I was mentoring other artists, I would always say, listen, if you can't be there on a Sunday, because obviously you're playing somewhere, just make sure you're part of a small group. Make sure you're part of a small group, at least that, because those people will be your support system, your spiritual support system. They'll pray for you. They can connect with you. They can, keep you accountable if that's what you need. Having a community, a spiritual community to kind of keep you grounded, like you said, is so, so very important. So yeah, great words. And it's a lot easier now to be connected with, everything that's happening online, and churches basically having weekly services online. I don't think the weekly services are going away anytime soon. When you're allowed in person to have church services, I think the online streams will continue. I think it's important that they do, because it meets the need for the people that can't necessarily be there in person, like musicians or people elderly that, can't get out of their house because they're sick or they're not mobile, they don't have a ride, whatever else. It's just, I can think of my mother-in-law who at times wasn't feeling well enough to go to church, and so she didn't go to church. Well, wouldn't it be nice if she could just turn on her TV or go online and be able to participate that way, right? That's right. Exactly that. So thank you to Hope Darst, and thank you so much to Andrew Ripp for being our guest on Between the Grooves this week. We have new episodes dropping every Monday, so take a listen, subscribe, leave us a rating and a review. That just helps us reach more people. And connect with us on social media. Twitter, Facebook, you know the deal, at Between Grooves. We would love to connect with you there and hang out and chat about all the things about this podcast and more. And I guess we'll see you next time. We hope we do anyway, right here on Between the Grooves.